They sold our family home with my forged signature. I only found out when it was already gone. That was the message that hit me like a brick. One line, and the ground gave way beneath me. Only later did my mind run back to the day I returned. I stepped off the train into a town where time felt frozen. The platform smelled of diesel and cheap vending machine coffee. In my coat pocket I held a brass key with an acorn charm. Grandpa had pressed it into my palm years ago, saying, "A house should recognize your hand." To me that key was a promise, that no matter what I could always come back and unlock my childhood. The street met me with cracked pavement, puddles peeling facades. At the gate, the paint was fresh, but the crooked 7 on the plate clung by one screw. On the porch, my brother's bike, Grandpa's planter, the welcome mat flipped upside down. The key slid into the lock easily, and for a second it felt like the house itself breathed in my return. Inside, the air carried dust and dried apples. On the fridge, a magnet I once brought from a trip, beside an old photo of me as a child. I brushed the dust away, and it lifted like a curtain. The walls still bore our history. A patched hole from a childhood punch, a bulge where a pipe had leaked, scratches from the day I first left. That day Grandpa gave me the key and said, "A house stands because someone holds on to it." My father had long lived elsewhere. On paper he was still a co-owner, but in reality the house stood only because of Grandpa and Mom. Mom's voice was always restrained. Over the phone she'd ask, "How are you?" And I would answer, "I'm managing, I saved for the roof, I'll find a contractor, I'll come visit longer next time." She'd say, "Don't rush." But what I heard was, "Hurry while we're still here." So I did, working nights, living in cheap apartments, wiring money every month with the note, as always. Every transfer felt like a thin thread holding us together. In my old room nothing had changed. The plaid bed cover, a jar of buttons, the green-shaded desk lamp. On the shelf, a ceramic owl with a broken wing. Next to Grandpa's photo and his cap. The mirror now showed a 31-year-old woman with tired eyes. I sat on the bed, placed the key beside me, and whispered to myself, "Martha, you're home." Evening pressed against the windows. The chipped kettle hissed on the stove. I pictured Mom and me finally laying the bills on the table and saying, "Now everything will be fair." On the porch I ran the acorn charm across the wood. It chimed like a bell. I poured all my belief into that sound. I didn't know then that the lock had already been tampered with, and the roots I clung to had been torn out. But how could I have known? I used to think no one really knew how much money I poured into that house. I never bragged about numbers. To me that's just what family does. You don't measure family in dollars. But the proof is everywhere. Years of bank slips with property taxes typed in the memo line. Transfers for utilities, roof repairs, back gas bills, even insurance. Every month, as usual. Sometimes that meant skipping a new coat, canceling a trip, or giving up classes I wanted. I'd sit in the office late at night, city lights burning outside, wiring money into a house I barely saw. Mom's thanks always came fast, almost guilty. My brother's favorite line was, "Our ATM is working again." I laughed it off because the truth would have hurt more. They never saw me counting coins after rent. They never saw the nights I cried into cold kitchen air when my paycheck disappeared into someone else's bills. I kept a notebook. Checkered pages filled with dates, amounts, notes in the margin. January 15th, roof down payment. March 3rd, county taxes cleared. April 20th, insurance premium wired. On the last page I wrote, "This house stands because of me." Holding that sentence felt like pressing my palms against the walls themselves. I believed one day that notebook would matter. That I'd sit at the kitchen table, open it, and Mom would finally say, "We couldn't have done it without you." I was proud of carrying it all, even when it left me with nothing. I thought coming home would turn sacrifice into gratitude. I didn't know then that to them, my years of silent sacrifice meant nothing. And how could I prove my worth if they had already erased it? I had pictured this moment 100 times. Mom rushing to hug me, my brother smiling, the kettle whistling, both of them saying, "Finally you're home." Reality was nothing like that. Mom stood by the stove, stirring too hard, her eyes blank. She gave me a quick nod, then turned away. My brother sat in the living room, glued to his phone. "Hey," he muttered without even looking up. I hung my coat on the old hook, froze. Everything looked the same, yet none of it felt warm. I tried small talk, the roof, the taxes, the money I'd sent. Mom answered in fragments. We manage. I'll tell you later. Then coldly. Your father didn't always agree, but he had to sign. Her tone made it clear, don't ask. At dinner the silence was louder than the spoons hitting bowls. I spoke about my job, my life in the city. They nodded without listening. Mom tossed questions like, so how's your apartment? But never waited for answers. My brother just muttered, cool. It was like they were waiting for me to leave. Quick glances, stiff shoulders, the air heavy with something unsaid. Afterward, Mom shoved dishes into the sink. You must be tired. Go rest. Not caring, just dismissing. My brother slipped out the door with a flat, I'm going out. I stayed in the dim kitchen. The ceiling light flickered, shadows stretching across the worn vinyl table. My hand rested on it, remembering laughter, Grandpa's stories, warmth. None of it was here anymore. The chill wasn't in the room. It was under my ribs. This house was supposed to welcome me. Instead, I felt like a stranger in my own home. If I had known what their silence was hiding, I would have braced myself. Instead, I just sat there, listening to the neighbor's dog bark, waiting for the storm I couldn't see. Morning air. Damp leaves stuck to my shoes. I was on my way for bread and milk when our neighbor Mr. Johnson stepped out with a trash bag. He froze, eyes uneasy. Have you heard? He whispered. Heard what? I tried to smile. He sighed, shifted the bag. The house, Martha. It's been sold. Few weeks now. The words knocked the ground out from under me. Sold? Our house? I gripped the bag like it weighed 100 pounds. To who? My voice cracked. Some investor. County record says April 14th. Notary number 12, County K. They let it go cheap, almost a giveaway. My head roared, my knees shook. I don't even remember running back inside. Just the door slamming, the kitchen closing in. Is it true? I threw the bag on the table, stared at Mom. She didn't flinch. Calm, flat. Yes. We had to. It was our decision. Our decision? My hands trembled. I sent money for years, taxes, repairs, everything. And you never said a word? Her eyes slid away. Rehearsed words. This isn't up for discussion, Martha. The wallpaper, the photo on the fridge, the floor under my feet, all familiar yet collapsing. You knew what this house meant to me, I whispered. This wasn't just walls. It was everything we had left. She stayed silent. Stone. I clung to the table to stay upright. In my head, Grandpa's voice. A house stands because someone holds on to it. And in that moment I realized I had been the only one holding on. If they had sold it behind my back, what else had they done? The kitchen shrank around me. One yellow light above, shadows pressing in. Mom kept polishing the same spoon like her life depended on it. I sat at the table, staring at the old vinyl cover, waiting for words that never came. The clock in the living room ticked too loud. When did you do it? My voice cut sharper than I meant. She froze, then went back to wiping. My brother strolled in, phone in hand, leaned on the frame without looking at me. A while ago. Back in the spring. While I was saving every dollar, planning to make the house mine, they had already signed it away. And you never told me? You knew I wanted to save this place. Mom didn't lift her eyes. We had to move fast. Debts. Problems. No choice. But I was sending money. My palm stuck to the table. Bills, taxes, repairs, it was all on me. My brother smirked. The words came like a knife. You've always just been an ATM, Martha. Something ripped inside. Not a sister. Not family. Just a card spitting out cash. Every late night at the office, every canceled trip, every worn-out coat, all reduced to ATM. How can you even say that? I gave everything I had so this house would stand. Mom finally looked up. Her eyes were cold stone. You're exaggerating. We made the decision for ourselves. For themselves. Not for us. Not for family. She slid an envelope across the table. A letter from the buyer's attorney. Vacate within 7 days. Dated, stamped, final. My brother went back to his phone. Mom lowered her gaze again as if I wasn't even there. And in that moment the last thread snapped. Everything I believed in crumbled right there, between the soup, the vinyl table, and the faint smell of apples. I didn't just lose the house. I lost the family I thought I had. But was that family ever really mine? The next day I walked back into the house and barely recognized it. A moving truck sat in the driveway, doors open, boxes stacked like coffins. Two men in work jackets hauled out the old hallway cabinet that had stood there my entire childhood. To them it was wood. To me it was a piece of my life. Careful! I shouted. They stared, puzzled, as if they couldn't understand why anyone cared about junk. Inside, half the living room was already gone. The TV, the bookshelf, the old couch where my brother and I once watched cartoons. On the wall, pale rectangles where family photos had hung. Blank squares staring back like open wounds. I climbed the stairs. Each step echoed too loud, mocking me. The attic was stripped bare. The toy boxes gone. Photo albums stacked in a corner. Tagged. Ready for someone else. Even Grandpa's rug gone. Only a strip of dust where it had been. In my room the bed remained. The closet gaped. Empty. On the floor scattered books, a torn diary, one loose page smelling of dust and dried ink. Childhood pressed into paper. On the wall my crooked drawings still clung, edges curling. One showed a little house with a bright sun, captioned in my messy hand, "Our home." It looked absurd, and it broke me more than anything else. I sank onto the cold boards. Each box leaving the house was proof. My sacrifices meant nothing. Were they moving furniture? Or hauling away my childhood? Grandpa's bedtime stories. Mom's pies back when she laughed. Even the fights, the moments I felt needed. All of it shoved into boxes, carted to somewhere I'd never see. This wasn't just a sale. It was erasure. And I didn't know yet. The proof of that erasure was already written in black and white, waiting in the documents. After the moving truck, I couldn't calm down. My chest burned with grief and rage. But under it all, resolve. If the house was sold, there had to be proof. That evening, when Mom and my brother stepped out, I started searching. It felt wrong, like stealing in my own home, but shame had no place left in me. In the hallway closet between old bills, I found a thin folder marked sale. My pulse hammered so loud I thought the walls could hear it. Inside, deed recorded. April 14th. Notary number 12, County K. Buyer, Westbrook LLC. Marked good faith purchaser. My signature. Only it wasn't mine. The lines trembled like a bad imitation. A power of attorney, my name on it. No official seal. No serial number. Clearly forged. Missing stamps. Missing signatures. My father's name standing in for all co-owners. The page pulsed in my hands like a wound. They hadn't just hidden the sale. They had erased me legally. And a colder thought. They knew I would fight. That's why they cut me out. The next morning I carried the folder to the county office. Laid it on the counter, showed my ID, pointed at the shaky signature. The clerk barely glanced before shaking his head. On paper everything looks clean. If your name's on it, it stands, until a court says otherwise. His words froze me more than betrayal itself. The system didn't care who I was. Only ink. Back home I spread the papers on the kitchen table. Mom walked in, saw them. "You knew about this?" My voice cracked. She glanced, shrugged. "Don't get involved, Martha. It's already done." I lifted the deed. The forged scrawl screamed at me. "This is fake. You know it." She turned back to the stove, stirring a pot like I hadn't spoken. "We did what had to be done. Could have been worse." "For who? For you or for me?" My voice rose. She never looked back. They weren't just selling the house. They were silencing me. Erasing me. The next morning as I walked through town I froze. Parked outside the cafe was a brand new car. My brother leaning against it, grinning at his friends. Later, I heard my mother talking on the phone about a well-deserved trip. She was already planning with the down payment from the sale. The money I had bled out for years, the nights I skipped meals, the vacations I never took was already gone. Not spent on debts. Not on survival. On luxury. That realization burned worse than the forged signature. They hadn't just stolen the house. They had cashed in my sacrifices and turned them into toys and holidays. Every dollar I wired had been twisted into proof that I was nothing more than their ATM. But that night, staring at those papers, I felt a new fire. They could lie. They could forge. They could silence. I would not let them erase me. That night I made my decision. I would find an attorney. If the house was stolen illegally, I'd fight to prove it. The moment I said the word attorney, the silence shattered like glass. Mom slammed her cup down, tea splashing across the table. Martha, you can't be serious. A lawsuit? Really? These are our affairs, not yours. Ours. My voice shook. You forged my signature. You knew I had the right to buy the house first. My brother laughed short, ugly. What right? You never lived here. You've always been somewhere else. You're a stranger in this house. A stranger. The words ripped through me. Who paid your bills? Who fixed the roof when it leaked? Who wired money every month for taxes? You're exaggerating, Mom snapped. Money isn't everything. Money. My laugh came sharp. You begged for help. And I gave up everything just to keep this place standing. Her eyes hardened. The house is us. We decided what was best. You should support us, not turn into our enemy. Enemy. Traitor. Not family. You're our daughter, she added, almost pleading. You're supposed to stand with us. Supposed to. My whole life had been about what I was supposed to do. Work harder, send more, stay quiet. Now they wanted me to nod to my own erasure. My brother leaned in, voice dripping contempt. You think we owe you? You just did what you wanted. Nobody asked you. Nobody asked you. The knife went deeper. Years of sacrifice, dismissed with one line. Know what? He smirked. Go back to your city. Stay there. You were never really part of this family anyway. His eyes were pure ice. No regret. No hesitation. And then Mom slid an envelope across the table. A notice from the buyer's attorney. Vacate the property within 7 days. The words burned through me. This wasn't family betrayal anymore. This was legal war. I shook all over. Every transfer, every sacrifice, erased in their eyes. They wanted me gone, ashamed, silent. But under the hurt, something hardened. Resolve. If this was their first attack, worse was coming. And I was right. The next discovery hit harder. Proof it hadn't been desperation. It had been planned all along. The next morning, I carried the folder to a lawyer's office downtown. Shelves stacked with law codes. The bitter smell of burnt coffee. Behind the desk, a man in his 40s with steady eyes. I slid him the folder and my notebook. He read in silence, marking lines, frowning. After what felt like forever, he looked up. Martha, this is messy. The deed went through a notary. County record shows. April 14th. Notary number 12. Buyer, Westbrook LLC. Listed as a bona fide purchaser. On paper it's clean. I almost jumped from my chair. But the signature is forged. Anyone can see that. He gave me a tired smile. Forgery can only be proven with a handwriting expert. That means testimony, depositions, years of hearings. 2, maybe 3. And it won't be cheap. Add this power of attorney. Even if it looks suspicious, it gives them cover. My stomach sank. Court meant sleepless years, money I didn't have, odds stacked against me. So, there's nothing I can do? My voice cracked. You can fight, he said quietly. But ask yourself, is it worth it? You won't just be fighting papers. You'll be fighting your own family. I stared at the forged scrawl on the page, pulse racing. And then he added, lower, almost off the record. This buyer, your so-called good faith purchaser, he's not as innocent as the file makes it look. There are whispers he knew the signature was shaky. He just chose not to look too closely. That happens more than you'd think. So even the buyer wasn't blind. He had seen the cracks and pretended not to. I left the office into cold night air. Folder pressed to my chest. My thoughts spun. Do I really want to give years of my life to fight for walls that already betrayed me? Or is it time to build something new? And for the first time the idea crept in, maybe instead of fighting for ruins I should create something of my own. For days after the fight, I drifted like a ghost. Mom avoided me. My brother vanished in the mornings, came home late at night. The silence pressed in thick, sticky. Then one morning I ran into Mrs. Harris, our neighbor. The kind of woman who knew everyone's business before they did. She gave me a pitying look, lowered her voice. Sweetheart, I saw your father meeting with that man. The one who owns the house now. Back in the spring. He was carrying folders, handing them over. I froze. Back in the spring? Are you sure? She nodded. More than once. In your yard. Papers exchanged. I thought you knew. Her words hit like a blow to the temple. This wasn't desperation. Not last minute. It was planned. For months. While I wired money. While I clung to the illusion I was holding the house together, they were already walking strangers through my yard. I stumbled home, leaned against the wallpaper that still remembered my childhood, and it hit me they hadn't just left me out. They had written me out. On purpose. Mom's words echoed. It was our decision. And I realized I was never part of that our. It was always them. Their debts. Their new life. Without me. In the living room, a half-open box spilled its contents. A photo album. One picture on top, me, Mom, my brother, Grandpa's hand on my shoulder. All smiles. I stared until the smiles twisted into mockery. Those people no longer existed. They had already erased me long ago. Humiliation burned. They hadn't just stolen the house. They'd forced me to watch while my past was sold for pennies. I sat among the boxes, gripping that faded photo. Maybe I was never really a daughter. Never a sister. Maybe just an ATM with a heartbeat. And then the thought struck sharp. This wasn't about a house anymore. It was about proving I existed. That they couldn't cross me out like a forged signature. What I didn't know was that a second, even harder blow was waiting. In a dusty box where Grandpa had hidden a letter with my name on it. I sifted through boxes in the living room, trying to salvage scraps of a life. A broken photo album. School certificates. Faded holiday cards. All of it tossed like trash. At the very bottom I found it. A yellowed envelope. Brittle paper, glue sealed for decades. Across the front, uneven letters. Martha. My grandfather's handwriting. My hand shook as I tore it open. Inside, one fragile page. I smoothed it across my knee. Martha, this house will always be your refuge. Guard it well. Here lies your root, your peace, your strength. The doors of this home will always open for you. I read it again and again until the words blurred with tears. This wasn't a note. It was a testament. Proof that Grandpa had seen me, the true heir. The little girl with the key in her pocket. And I had carried that key all my life, believing one day I'd use it as he intended. But those doors had been handed to strangers. Sold cheap. Behind my back. And Mom had to know about this letter. She chose money anyway. I clutched the page so tight it nearly tore. My brother's sneer echoed. You were always just an ATM. Mom's voice followed. It was our decision. And in between, Grandpa's words. Warm. Honest. Unmistakable. Two worlds colliding. One where I mattered. One where I was erased. They hadn't just stolen walls and rooms. They had stolen the promise I made to him. They had stolen something sacred. I sat with the letter in my hands, tears mixing with fury, and felt something shift for good. Mom and my brother weren't family anymore. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had betrayed him. And that's when I decided I had to look them in the eye. If they didn't understand what they'd lost, I would make them hear it. I sat with Grandpa's letter until silence burned holes inside me. If I didn't speak now, it would rip me apart. That evening, at the kitchen table, I laid the letter down between us. They looked at it, then at me, daring me to begin. You knew, didn't you? My voice shook, but my eyes stayed locked. Grandpa trusted me with this house. He wanted it to be my refuge. And you knew it. Mom exhaled, turned away. You're exaggerating. They're just words. Just words. My throat went dry. It was his will. His promise. And you crushed it. My brother finally lifted his eyes from his phone, smirking. You live in fantasies, Martha. A house is just walls. We decided. End of story. We decided. The phrase snapped something inside me. You decided without me. Against me. And now you dare call me dramatic? Mom's lips pressed thin, her eyes like glass. You don't understand. It's only a building. People matter more. I slammed my palm against the table. The cups rattled. No, it's not just a building. It's Grandpa's library. My drawings on the walls. Years of sacrifice while you stood by. And you dare call it just walls? My brother shrugged. You're making drama. This is our life, not yours. I stared at them. And what I felt wasn't sorrow anymore, it was disgust. You know what? My voice dropped cold sharp. You didn't just lose a house. You lost me. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear water humming in the pipes. Mom didn't flinch. My brother dropped back to his phone as if I'd never spoken at all. And in that silence I felt the line cross. There was no going back. Whatever we once meant, it was gone. And in that moment a new thought took root. Maybe it was time to stop fighting for ashes and start building something of my own. After that confrontation, I walked the house like it was already a ruin. Even what remained felt poisoned. The kitchen table, once laughter, now a witness to betrayal. The old clock in the living room didn't keep time anymore. Ticked out my defeat. And then it hit me. Why fight for this place? It wasn't mine. It had become a monument to lies. If I clung to these walls, I'd repeat the same mistake, pouring myself out until nothing was left. This time I had to choose differently. I sat on my childhood bed, Grandpa's letter in my hands. He had written, "This house will always be your refuge." Maybe he hadn't meant these walls. Maybe he meant something bigger. A refuge I could build myself. A place no betrayal could reach. A place with doors always open. The thought scared me at first. But the more I turned it over, the stronger it grew. I opened my notebook, scribbled ideas. An old school. A forgotten hall. A building downtown. Renovate it. Fill it with laughter, with art, with children's drawings taped to the walls. A home not defined by bloodlines but by belonging. The money I once wired away each month? It would stay mine. No more feeding a family that saw me as nothing but an ATM. The thought was strangely light. For the first time in years I felt free. That night the wind howled outside, but inside me there was peace. I had lost a house, yes. But I had gained something greater, the right to build on my own terms. I stood, took Grandpa's key and slipped it into my pocket. Not as a doorway to the past, but as a symbol of strength. A reminder that I could build my own doors. My own walls. For the first time in years I smiled. What I didn't know was that my family wasn't done. They were about to strike again, aiming to humiliate me completely. I had finally started to let go. A new plan was forming, and for the first time in years I felt lighter. And then the next blow landed. One morning, an envelope in the mailbox. No return address. No name. Someone had placed it there on purpose. Inside, a photograph. My stomach dropped. Mom. My brother. A cluster of relatives. All of them smiling in front of our house. Beside them, the new owner in a sleek coat. They looked straight into the camera, celebrating. On the back, in bold black letters, "We're happy without you." The air thickened like smoke as I stared. Those smiles weren't innocent. They were knives. This wasn't a picture. It was a message. A deliberate humiliation. Mom's face lit with a smile I hadn't seen in years. My brother's grin, triumphant, smug. They weren't hiding. They were flaunting it. Flaunting my erasure. The pain was so sharp I almost ripped the photo apart. My hands shook. But then I froze. If they were truly happy, why send this at all? Their forced celebration was proof. Proof I still lived in their heads. Proof they couldn't feel victory unless I saw it. Strangely, that gave me strength. Yes, the photo was poison. But it was also evidence I still mattered enough to be targeted. I slid the picture into the drawer beside Grandpa's letter. 2 witnesses. One of betrayal, one of trust. And in the space between them, my choice solidified. Fine. Keep your house. But you will never touch the new home I'm about to build. That same week, I took my first real step forward. I went to see an abandoned building that soon would become my refuge. After the photo, there was no going back. I stopped trying to reclaim what was lost. Instead, I went to see a building someone had told me about. An old school on the edge of town. Broken windows. Peeling paint. A leaking roof. The yard wild with weeds. The doors groaned open, and the echo rushed down empty hallways. The air reeked of dust, mold, forgotten books. In the hallway, hooks for children's coats still hung. In one classroom, chalk on the board. Summer 2007. I stood in the wreckage, yet my heart beat faster. Yes, it was a ruin. But I could already see it alive. Children's drawings taped to the walls. The smell of coffee and fresh bread. People stepping inside and feeling. This place welcomes me. I walked room to room, fingers brushing cracked plaster. In my head a plan was forming. paint windows, furniture. It would take time. It would cost money. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I felt alive. That evening I sat on the windowsill, staring at sunset through fractured glass. Maybe home was never walls at all. Maybe it was what you built inside them. The weeks blurred into work. Day 1, hauling mountains of trash. Day 2, new windows. Day 3. I took a brush myself, white paint rolling over grime like fresh breath over decay. And slowly the place transformed. Strangers wandered in to help. One brought chairs. Another tables. Others just water and sandwiches. It wasn't mine alone anymore. It was becoming shared. Months later we opened the doors. Children raced through the halls, laughter echoing. In the library corner, their eyes lit at the sight of new books. Their joy filled the rooms like sunlight. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the largest room. My palm rested on the fresh wall, still warm. And for the first time I thought, this is home. No betrayal here. No forged signatures. No staged smiles. Just life I had built myself. On the wall, I hung Grandpa's letter in a frame. His words finally had a place to live. And with that, I knew the final chapter was coming. The catharsis that would close this story for good. The day my center opened, it felt like a real home. Not one bound by blood or secrets, but one filled with laughter and light. Children sprinted through the halls, drawing suns, houses, trees on the giant sheets taped to the walls. One boy sketched a key and said softly, "This is for doors that always stay open." My chest tightened. In the library corner, 2 girls whispered poems over books. Down the hall, teenagers tuned the old piano a retired teacher had donated. Someone brought tea. Someone else baked cookies. Everyone smiled. Everyone helped. And for the first time, I knew what home really meant. I stood by the window, sunlight spilling through new glass. Beside me hung Grandpa's letter, framed at last. His words weren't mine alone anymore. They had become a promise to anyone who walked in. This house will always be your refuge. The old home still lingered in memory. Mom's cold eyes, my brother's sneer, the empty room stripped bare. But now that pain wasn't a weight. It was a foundation. It had led me here. To strength. Children rushed over, their drawings in hand. I laughed with them, studying each page. One showed a crooked little house with a blazing sun above it. I pinned it beneath Grandpa's letter. Past and future met on that wall. That night, when the last visitor left, silence settled over the rooms. But it wasn't hollow anymore. It was full of voices, laughter, chalk dust, beginnings. I pulled the old brass key from my pocket, the one with the acorn charm Grandpa had given me. I turned it in my hand, felt the cold metal one last time, then set it down beneath his letter. It no longer belonged to the past. It belonged here. And for the first time I felt peace. I didn't need to prove I existed anymore. A week later at the hardware store, I overheard 2 contractors talking. Westbrook had pulled out. The good faith purchaser flipped the title to a lien company and vanished. The house stood empty again. Dark windows, a sagging porch, rain stitching the doorway where the lock had been fixed. Neighbors said the photo I got, their bright staged smiles, was taken the same day they learned the buyer wouldn't keep them. By June, the roof bled water into the hallway. By August, the city taped a yellow notice to the gate. Condemned. The number 7 on the plate finally fell off. Someone told me my mother tried to call. The screen lit with her name. I watched it ring until it went quiet. Not out of revenge, out of mercy for myself. Some ruins teach you more standing as warnings than rebuilt as lies. That night I walked past the old yard. Weeds had taken the path. The welcome mat was gone. In the new center, the lights were still warm, drawings still taped to the walls, laughter caught in the corners like sunlight. I stood by Grandpa's letter and understood. Justice doesn't always arrive in court. Sometimes it arrives as an empty house that can't pretend to be a home anymore. I had built a house that stood because of me. A place no betrayal could touch. Grandpa's words echoed differently now. This house will always be your refuge. They took my home. But this one no one will ever take away.